So we're going to be looking at color in Illustrator. Color is a huge subject, so this is just a little introduction. And Illustrator has massive color features that I'm not going to deal with in this video. I'm just dealing with some basic concepts here. So we have a little illustration here, and you'll see at the moment that the document is in RGB color mode. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an RGB version for screens. We're going to create a CMYK or process version for print, and we're going to do a two-color spot color version, just so that you can see how those work. So the one thing to remember is RGB is for screens and CMYK is for print. Now there are two different color modes and they have different color gamuts. In other words, the amount of color that they can represent. So RGB has a wider color gamut because it's creating color with light. CMYK has a narrower color gamut because it's creating color with print and with inks. And so you've got to bear that in mind when you're designing, that your RGB colors are going to most likely be more vibrant, more saturated than your print. And so you need to make sure that there's a match there. So especially if you're dealing with, say, corporate colors or logo colors, things like that, you don't want what you see on a website to be much brighter and more vibrant than what you see in a printed flyer, for example. You want them to match. And so unless it's just a screen illustration and you want it to be as vibrant as you like, then of course there's no rules. But if you want everything to match, you need to make sure that you are careful with that. So this orange here, you can see that if I double click on the color picker, you can see it's actually giving me a warning here. It's saying out of gamut. So it's telling me this orange that I've chosen in RGB is not going to print the same. And to prove that, I'm going to convert briefly this document to CMYK to show you. So File, Document Color Mode, CMYK. Watch that orange. You should have noticed a very slight shift from vibrant to slightly dimmer. And that's a typical issue that a lot of people have with taking a design that they've done in RGB and converting it to CMYK, is there's a loss of vibrancy. So you have to live with that. You can fiddle around with colors and try and get the best result, but you're just never going to get a printed result that matches the result of something that you've designed for screen. So what you want to do if you want them to match is what I do is I convert my RGB to CMYK first and then back to RGB, so that I can then make sure that my CMYK and RGB colors match, because it's a one-way street. When you convert from RGB to CMYK, you lose the vibrancy. When you convert back to RGB from CMYK, you don't get them back again. So if I do that, so File, Color Document Mode, CMYK, and then back to RGB, I now don't have that vibrancy, and I know that what I see here in RGB is going to be matched in what I see on a printed document. So I'm going to look at my swatches panel. I like to manage my swatches really carefully, so this is what it would normally look like. I'm going to go to List View, and I'm also going to go to Options and select all unused and delete. I do not want to see colors that I'm not using. That's a good way of managing your colors. I'm going to get rid of that. So I'm just left with none, registration, white and black. And generally speaking, you shouldn't use registration. That's a print option. So now I want to add the swatches that I'm working with here. So I'm going to select that orange and add it. I could give it a name, but I'm just going to leave it with its RGB values. And you can see it's an RGB color because of this little red, green and blue icon here. The little white tag in the corner, the little dog ear, is telling us it's a global color, which means that if I change the original color, whatever artwork has that color applied will also change, which is a good thing in most situations. Let's also add this caramel color. Let's add this vanilla color. Let's add the light blue. And let's add the purple. Okay, so now we have all the colors that we're using in this artwork, and I'm going to select them all and click on New Color Group, and I'll just call it Yum Yum RGB. Okay, so now I've got those colors saved. That's a good way of working because it means that you have control of your colors in your swatches. So this job is now ready to be saved as an RGB illustration that you can then use for screens, export as a PNG with transparency in the background, and so on. So I'm going to save it, and I will just call it Yum Yum RGB. Okay. Then I need a print version, something that I can put into a flyer or brochure or stickers or things like that. So I'm going to convert back to CMYK. And then even though it's telling me that all of my colors are now processed because of that little CMYK icon, I want to get the CMYK values as well. So with nothing selected, I'm going to actually delete all of these. So that I can re-add these colors with the CMYK value. So I'm going to take that orange, and you can see now it says CMYK, caramel, vanilla, the light blue, and the purple. Okay, so now I have my CMYK colors. I'm going to select and make into a color group, and I'll just call them Yum Yum CMYK. Okay, and just to check that I don't have any unwanted colors, I'm going to go to Window, Separations Preview, and make sure that I only have CMYK colors here. So it's a processed document. Now it's ready to be saved, and then either just used as it is as an Illustrator file in, for example, an InDesign brochure, or exported as a TIFF for use in any kind of print situation. So I'm going to save it as Yum Yum CMYK. Okay, so next, let's say that we want a two-color job. So maybe the client says, okay, we want to print stickers to hand out at a music concert, and we don't want them to be full color. We want to save a bit of money here. We want them to be two colors, and it's going to be the purple and the caramel color. So we need to process this into a two-color job. So I'm going to get rid of these again. And it's going to be the caramel and the purple. So I'm going to select that and add it. But this time I'm going to change from process to spot. Now I could try and select a color. I'm just going to show you here, a color from color books. So you can see there's various color books here. Unfortunately, Adobe had a divorce with Pantone a few years ago. I don't know what happened there, but Pantone colors are no longer available in Adobe without some sort of special subscription, which I'm not going to do. So Pantone is really the industry standard for different color books. And because they're no longer available in the off-the-shelf version of Illustrator, I'm not going to use any color books at all. I'm going to rather make spot colors out of the CMYK options. So with my caramel selected, add spot. We'll leave it on CMYK and we'll say OK. So you can see that the color swatch now has a little spot. It's telling us this is a spot color, and it's also global by default. So basically a spot color is a color that's pre-mixed and printed instead of created by printing cyan, magenta, yellow, and black together in little dots. It's actually printing that specific color that's being pre-mixed. And sort of almost like when you go to the hardware store and you choose a color swatch from your options and you get it mixed up for you. Okay, and then we're going to take the purple. So let's go and choose that, and let's make a spot color out of that. Okay, so now we have our caramel and purple, and we're going to turn that into a color group. I'm just going to say spot colors. Let's say Yum Yum spot colors. Okay, and then I want to convert this whole job into just those two spot colors. So I'm going to select the whole thing, And I'm going to go up here to a button that says Recolor Artwork. And I'm going to go to Advanced Options, and I'm going to choose my color group here. And you can see that what it's done is it's remapped all the colors to those two colors. It hasn't done the best job here. So the first thing I'm going to do is go here and choose Preserve Tints, and for both of those. And then I'm going to remap colors. So let's say I want the purple. I'm going to drag the purple down to be purple. And I'm going to also drag that purple down. So I'm now mapping the blue and the purples to purple and tints of that same purple. And then here's a lighter color. Let's just drag this down and see what happens. No, that doesn't really do anything interesting. Let's take that, map that. Okay, that looks a bit better. So I'm basically taking the original colors here and I'm remapping them to just two colors. Let's try this one. No, I prefer that. Okay, so that's not a bad result. You can play around with this and try and get exactly the result you want. I'm pretty happy with that as a two-color job. So I'm just going to say okay. So for the purposes of this video, I'm not going to fiddle too much with that. So now I have just a two-color job, and to check that, and you must check it, go to Window and Separations Preview, and make sure that if you turn off CMYK, that you still see your artwork. And if you turn off your spot colors, oh, I need to turn on CMYK here. If you turn off your spot colors, there's nothing there. So no colors are being mapped to process colors. They're all being mapped to those two spot colors. So this is now ready to go. And if you sent this to a printer, you would have to say that there's two spot colors separated, and those are the only two spot colors you need to use for this print job. So I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'll call this Yum Yum Spot, and save. Okay, so that's a little bit of an introduction into working with color modes and saving your work for various purposes, screen, print, and for spot colors.